Deuteronomy chapter 17 now. Moses is still giving his final instructions to Israel. Verse 1. You shall not sacrifice to Yahweh your God an ox or a sheep in which is a defect or anything evil, for that is an abomination to Yahweh your God. Comment, we wouldn't give a broken gift to someone or invite them over and serve bad food. That would be insulting, so Israel shouldn't offer a defective animal to Yahweh. That would be an abomination, he says. Now coming up a 6-verse section on what should be done if someone begins to worship falsely. Verse 2. If there is found among you, within any of your gates which Yahweh your God gives you, a man or a woman who does that which is evil in Yahweh your God's sight, in transgressing his covenant, and has gone and served other gods and worshipped them, or the sun, or the moon, or any of the stars of the sky, which I have not commanded, and you are told and you have heard of it, then you shall inquire diligently. Behold, if it is true, and the thing certain, that such abomination is done in Israel, then you shall bring out that man or that woman who has done this evil thing to your gates, even that same man or woman, and you shall stone them to death with stones. At the mouth of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses, he who is to die shall be put to death. At the mouth of 1 witness he shall not be put to death. The hand of the witnesses shall be first on him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. So you shall remove the evil from among you. Comment. Verse 4, the person who hears about false worship is responsible for speaking up, for looking into it, and seeing it through until justice is done. He can't pretend he didn't hear about it. He can't pretend it's none of his business. It is his business. Yahweh said the same thing in Leviticus 5:1. We have to speak up when we know about a crime. From the Message Bible, Leviticus 5:1, quote, if you sin by not stepping up and offering yourself as a witness to something you've heard or seen in cases of wrongdoing, you'll be held responsible, end quote. Silence isn't an option. God holds us responsible for reporting crime. It might be inconvenient, it might be risky, but it's our duty. To put someone to death, verse 4, the evidence must be certain, and verse 6, there must be at least 2 witnesses. Now coming up, legal cases will arise that are too difficult or complex to judge locally. Such cases must be brought for judgment to the one place which Yahweh will designate. We'll call it the capital, which will eventually be Jerusalem. Verse 8. If there arises a matter too hard for you in judgment between blood and blood, between plea and plea, between stroke and stroke, being matters of controversy within your gates, then you shall arise and go to the place which Yahweh your God chooses. You shall come to the priests who are Levites, and to the judge who shall be in those days. You shall inquire, and they shall give you the verdict. You shall do according to the decisions of the verdict which they shall give you from that place which Yahweh chooses. You shall observe to do according to all that they shall teach you, according to the decisions of the law which they shall teach you, and according to the judgment which they shall tell you, you shall do. Comment. Verse 11, the judgment shall come, quote, according to the decisions of the law. In other words, the priests and Levites in the capital must judge according to the law of Yahweh which came through Moses. Going on, you shall not turn away from the sentence which they shall show you to the right hand nor to the left. The man who does presumptuously and not listening to the priest who stands to minister there before Yahweh your God, or to the judge, even that man shall die. You shall put away the evil from Israel. All the people shall hear and fear and do no more presumptuously. Comment. There shall be respect for the law and respect for those who administer the law. Israelites shall not be free to do according to what's right in their own eyes. The law reigns supreme. No one should presume that he may disregard the verdict of the priests or judges. The penalty for disregarding them is death. Quote, even that man shall die. Now a 6-verse section on kings. Yahweh doesn't want Israel to have a king because he's their king, 1 Samuel 8:7. But he knows that in the future Israel will insist on having a king, so he's going to address that now. Verse 14. When you have come to the land which Yahweh your God gives you, and possess it, and dwell in it, and say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are around me, you shall surely set him king over yourselves, whom Yahweh your God chooses. Comment. Verses 14 and 15, when Israel insists on putting a king over themselves, Yahweh's going to allow them to have one. But he says, it shall be the man I choose. Verse 15. You shall set as king over you one from among your brothers. You may not put a foreigner over you who is not your brother. Comment, the people aren't going to demand a king for another 400 years or so, but Yahweh has some commandments for that king already. Verse 16, only he shall not multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to the end that he may multiply horses, because Yahweh has said to you, you shall not go back that way again. Comment, the idea is that Israel doesn't need armaments. They don't need horses and chariots because Yahweh is their defender. Nevertheless, King Solomon will obtain for himself 40,000 horses, 1 Kings 4:26. Still speaking of that future king, verse 17, he shall not multiply wives to himself, that his heart not turn away. He shall not greatly multiply to himself silver or gold. Comment, hundreds of years from now, King Solomon is going to ignore this commandment and take 700 wives and 300 concubines for himself. And just as Yahweh predicted here, they turned his heart away from following the Lord. 1 Kings 11, verses 3 and 4. Solomon also accumulated a tremendous amount of gold, so much so that silver was considered of little value in his days. 1 Kings 10:21. However, Solomon didn't so much amass it for himself as much as Yahweh brought it to him. 1 Kings 3:13. But Solomon testified that all his wealth left him feeling empty. He said it was all vanity, chasing after wind, and unprofitable. Ecclesiastes 2:11. Coming now, 3 verses about how the king should study the law with diligence. Verse 18, it shall be when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, then he shall write himself a copy of this law in a book, out of that which is before the priests, the Levites. Comment, the priests and Levites are going to have accurate copies. The king should use theirs when he transcribes his personal copy. Verse 19, it shall be with him, and he shall read from it all the days of his life, that he may learn to fear Yahweh his God, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes, to do them, that his heart may not be lifted up above his brothers, or that he not turn away from the commandment to the right hand or to the left, to the end that he may prolong his days in his kingdom, he and his children in the middle of Israel. Comment, verse 19, the king shall read from the law of Moses all the days of his life. Daily reading. This is going to keep him humble, prolong his days on the throne, and secure the throne for his children. That's the chapter. See you for Deuteronomy 18 at landofhavilah.net. Deuteronomy 18.